Welcome back, Canonites, for another Halo the Series episode breakdown. As always, I'll be making comparisons to core canon, aka the games, books, and most other Halo media, though these shouldn't be taken as criticisms unless specified. With that, let's dive in. This episode finally gets into Maki's backstory, opening on the planet of Oban where she was raised. In core canon, Oban was a planet discovered after the outbreak of the Human Covenant War, and used as a relocation site for millions of refugees, eventually even some from New Mombasa. But beyond that, and being a UNSC staging area, very few details on the planet exist. In 2558, Oban was the site of a Guardian Emergence. In the Silver timeline, Oban is located in the Visper system and is classified as a Tier 2 waste salvage colony. This is one of the changes that didn't really land with me. Given Oban's core canon backstory as a planetary refugee camp, I feel like there would have been a great opportunity for commentary on the UNSC's treatment of war refugees, a not too uncommon criticism in core canon. Anyway, we soon meet who turns out to be a young Maki, being read the book Dawn of Angels by an unnamed friend. They talk about the idea of other planets, no surprise that barely educated children would be skeptical of the concept, though are soon caught by the security forces for the worksite. The boy is beaten to death, and we find that the scarring Maki carries was caused by one of the stun staffs. Seems that Maki's hatred of humans isn't entirely the result of her Covenant upbringing. Speaking of which, the Covenant soon show up. A pair of elites drop in and begin using a staff, which they refer to as a luminary, to search for something. Luminaries haven't been depicted much in core canon, though, like here, they are used to track down Forerunner relics, though usually not so directly. And, like with Maki, they will also identify humans, or more specifically, Reclaimers. In core canon, it was a luminary detecting the humans of Harvest that led to First Contact and, by extension, the Human Covenant War. Just as it looks like Maki will die, she's inadvertently saved by the elites, which goes a long way towards explaining her loyalty towards the Covenant. Flashing to the present, we find Maki in full human garb meeting with the High Prophets. She explains her plan to investigate at Madrigal, after which Mercy asks what she'll do if she encounters the Chief, one who is like her, setting up for a confrontation down the line. After the opening, we come to Reach, finding Miranda Keyes looking at a hologram of the Madrigal artifact. Admiral Parangoski confirms the artifact has been dated back over 100,000 years, the era of the Forerunners and the activation of Halo. Parangoski reveals that she's creating a parallel team to study the artifact, with Miranda at its head. We then get this shot from the trailer.
I'm interested in finding a way to be less reliant on Dr. Halsey moving forward.
Parangoski deliberately working Miranda against Halsey like this reminds me a lot of Soren Osman in the core canon. Born Saren Chelik, she was a Spartan II recruit whose body would be ravaged by the augmentation process, becoming one of the 30 believed to have been killed. In truth, Saren 019, like other fatalities, was put in cryo so she could potentially be resuscitated someday. Saren was taken in by Parangoski directly and raised as the Admiral's replacement. And, like what seems to be happening with Miranda, Saren came to, understandably, hate Dr. Halsey. I don't know if this is the exact route the show is going, but I can't help but feel some parallels to Saren Osman. Back to the show though, we cut over to Halsey's lab where the Cortana project is being prepped. Here, Halsey actually speaks to her clone, something which never happened in core canon, treating viewers to a bit of important exposition in the process. In core canon, development on Cortana began by Dr. Halsey cloning herself 20 times, rapidly growing the clones and emphasizing brain development, before harvesting them, transferring her memories into them, and merely one leading to the birth of Cortana. In total, Cortana's creation took about 6 months, with the AI born on November 7th, 2549, or 11/7. Additionally, she was created specifically for Operation Red Flag, a desperate move to end the Covenant War. In contrast, Silver Timeline Halsey has created but one clone, one which seems to have memories up to the Spartans' childhood before their augmentations. We incidentally discover that only 35 survived the process, the other 40 candidates implied to have died. In core canon, 35 survived the initial augmentations, with 12 crippled and 30 reportedly killed. Red Team from Halo Wars were among the 45 crippled or killed, incidentally. Back to the show though, the clone additionally knows about the Cortana project, meaning that Halsey has been thinking about this for years. As the conversation continues, the clone assembles what are referred to as Sorvad solids, something new to the Silver timeline that's named after Dr. Laszlo Sorvad, the dead scientist from Halo Reach. Behind the clone, we can spot a number of Spartan helmets, most looking like new designs, although this one might be a Nightfall helmet, again, hard to tell. Halsey then notes that she has
I've perfected the process for real-time neuroelectrical imaging.
Which definitely makes it sound like smart AI aren't a thing in this timeline. The brain scanning process was a well-established practice by the 26th century in core canon. Silver Timeline Cortana might be the first of her kind. The clone additionally asks after Miranda, making me wonder if, like in core canon, Halsey raised Miranda for several years before giving her over to Keyes. Halsey ends the conversation there, though, without an answer. The scene really shows just how cold and detached Halsey can be, and to nail it home, the clone asks one last question. Seems that Halsey considered how meeting her own clone could go, wondered if she'd even be able to go through with it. The clone asks what changed in the years since, to which Halsey responds,
Progress.
The next scenes deal with the creation of Cortana and her being implanted into the Master Chief, which, funny enough, seems to take a bit of inspiration from Red vs. Blue. After Halsey takes some time to convince John of this course of action, we see the creation of Cortana, a rather horrifying process that requires the clone to be awake while her brain is harvested. And I don't know about anyone else, but I got some major Dead Space 2 vibes from this scene. And on the subject of creepy, it seems that Dr. Saley here has the hots for his boss. I'm sure that's never going to come back up. After the harvesting, complete with traditional AI chip, Cortana is immediately implanted into John while the clone's body is destroyed. This is the Red vs. Blue inspiration I was mentioning earlier. Cortana implanted directly into the Chief's brain, similar to Project Freelancer and RVB, rather than being plugged into his armor. In core canon, events similar to this did play out. On August 29, 2552, just before Reach would fall, John underwent surgery to enhance his neural implant, after which he field-tested Mjolnir Mark V armor while having Cortana connected to his armor, the birth of a legendary partnership. Back to the show, though, Cortana comes online for the first time and speaks her first words.
When the game is over, the king and the pawn go back into the same box.
The same words core canon Cortana spoke when she was created, though in English here rather than Italian in core canon. The quote was one spoken to Halsey by her mother after their first game of chess. Cortana goes on to bring up the Chief's service record, during which we can see some of the graphics from the HaloTheSeries.tv website, remarking about the Chief being above average in strength, stamina, and good instincts. AKA...
luck.
While the Chief has always been noted as being lucky in terms of strength and stamina, Core Canon Chief was always considered something more of an average for a Spartan. Even in terms of leadership, there were some Spartans that could arguably outclass John. For me, that was part of what made the Chief special. That he wasn't the best, but average as far as Spartans go. He wasn't a chosen one, which it feels like the show is setting up for, just the Spartan who happened to make it. Over on the rubble, Quan Ha is getting restless, wanting to return home to fight. As she makes her way to see Soren, we can spot some people watching a news holo showing a Covenant CCS-class battlecruiser over the planet of Tantalus. In core canon, Tantalus was part of the Epsilon Eridani system, same as Reach, which can't be the case for the Silver Timeline. The planet was home to the Tantalus 10,000. Later, we can spot a fusion coil being used as a light, and Soren's son, Kessler, points out Hesiod's moon, Mediset. Mediset in core canon was intended by the Covenant for use as an Ungoi breeding colony, becoming forces that would first be used to take the rubble, and then eventually Earth. Obviously, that didn't happen. Back on Reach, John, now awake post-surgery, gets to meet Cortana for the first time. Their first meeting is a little rough, and probably not too far out of line for how things might have gone in core canon under the same circumstances. As previously mentioned, Cortana and John's first core canon meeting was immediately followed by a training exercise, showing John Cortana's value in the field. In the Silver Timeline, without any direct experience, John is understandably unsettled with the idea. We also learned that Cortana's implant comes with a hologram projector so she can just appear anywhere. We then cut to the UNSC Gladius on patrol near the 23 Libre system. Interestingly, the ship's class is never given, though it's modeled after the Gladius-class heavy corvette from core canon. Gladius-class corvettes were traditionally manufactured by Tansec AB, while this ship was produced by Synoviet Heavy Machinery. This appears to be a result of cost-saving measures by the production, with the bridge of the Gladius looking very similar to the bridge of the Stalwart Dawn seen in the last episode. I will say though, the ship interiors so far have looked like they were pulled straight out of the games. Anyway, the Gladius soon encounters a Covenant SDV heavy corvette and are hailed by Maki, pretending to be an escaped colonist from Circumstance. Circumstance in core canon was also a planet from the Epsilon Eridani system, and home to Kurt 051, Spartan 2, and eventual lead of the Spartan 3 program. It was also home to the future Spartan 4, Carlo Hoya. The captain sends over a remote Bumblebee escape pod to pick up Maki and brings her over. Of course, if you've seen the trailers, you know how this goes. Maki boards and unleashes a swarm of Lekgolo, eel-like creatures that make up hunters, or Mega Lekgolo as they are properly called. We actually get to see a hunter tease just a little earlier. Taking the ship and finishing its captain with a cool fingernail-embedded energy blade, Maki finds that any data had been purged, per the Cole Protocol, and resumes her quest to Madrigal. Before leaving the ship, she makes a transition to her ship, informing the crew that the Gladius held nothing of value. We'll come back to this later. Back on Reach, Halsey begins her tests with the Madrigal artifact, having John touch it while Cortana monitors him. Once the artifact activates, Halsey has Cortana put the Chief in a sort of stasis, something never possible in core canon, at which point the activity stops. Only a Reclaimer in control of themselves, it seems, can activate these relics. Heading back to the Spartan barracks, John spots Marines playing a game of some kind. I don't know if it's based on anything in universe. The Marines spot John, and the room is quiet as the Marines are in awe of the Spartan. In the Spartan barracks, we find Kai-125 engaged with a memory game, while Vanek and Riz play what I can only describe as 4D chess. On a wall, we can see per mare, per terras, per constellatium, meaning by the sea, by the earth, and by the stars. An apt motto for the UNSC. Kai's memory game includes some familiar terms, including Banshee, Longsword, Ungoi, the species name for grunts, Scarab, and Meg. While Meg might not seem like much, this could be a reference to an old Easter egg from Halo CE and Halo 2, the Meg. Created by designer Jamie Griesmer for his girlfriend, the original Meg was a bloody heart with an M made from bullet holes, and could only be found with a ridiculous series of tasks. Back to the episode though, John meets with Silver Team, who have been briefed on his recent actions. Before he can leave, Cortana appears and introduces herself. While the Chief is annoyed at her actions, Silver Team look a little more distressed. I suspect mostly because John kept a secret from them. We'll have to see how that develops down the line. Later, we find John searching for information about his memories, using one of these Spartan pods we saw Kai using for her memory game earlier. Cortana offers assistance, which the Chief eventually allows. Based on his descriptions, Cortana is able to identify 103 colonies or moons that might match John's inquiry. In core canon, humanity had over 800 colonies and stations strewn across the Orion arm of the galaxy. Though he doesn't know it yet, John is searching for Eridanus II, his homeworld. Cortana's results, though, do pull up a number of familiar planets. Alleria was a desert world introduced in Halo Nightfall, whose lore seems to fall in line with its core canon counterpart. We can make out on the screen that the colony was founded in the 2400s and holds a population of over 295,000. A drought began to ravage the planet in 2453 as the local star, Elduros in core canon, entered a period of instability that's been ongoing ever since. And like in core canon, the planet was effectively abandoned by the UEG. Alleria has one moon, though I can't make its name out. Next we have Algolis, which we covered extensively in my video on the website for the series, linked in the description below. Here it's noted as being founded in 2475 and, like in core canon, was attacked by the Covenant in 2549, though here its planetary defenses were destroyed by brute packs. Pablo Schreiber mentioned brutes being in the show in an interview, so we know they're coming, but this appears to be the first in-show reference to them. Silver Timeline Algolis only has one moon, whereas the core canon version had at least two. Next up we have Binturol, a colony founded in the 2400s, though I can't make out the exact year, holding a population of over 230,000 and, like in core canon, is home to a mix of human and alien populations, and home for all sorts of illegal activity. Binturol has a single moon and appeared in Hunt the Truth and Halo Renegades. Irene doesn't feature much in core canon, notably being the home to future Spartan 3 Jonah B-283. Kelly 087 also detonated a nuke during the Covenant's invasion of the planet, destroying a Covenant forward operating base and temporarily saving a major city. The Silver Timeline references these actions, noting that while the planet was glassed by the Covenant, no date given strangely, the UNSC inflicted heavy casualties for the Covenant too. Irene was also founded in the 2400s, had a population of 14 million, and has one moon. Gallodu is the first new planet shown from these results, founded in what appears to be 2456 and currently home to a population of 9 million. Like the other planets, it has a single moon, this one named Clark. The colony was attacked in 2527, marking the earliest known attack in the Silver Timeline. The planet is also noted as being home to an insurrectionist movement known as the Gallodu Emancipation, or at least I think that's what it's called. Minderia is our next planet and might as well be a creation of the Silver Timeline, as very few details on the planet exist in core canon. In the Silver Timeline, the colony was founded in 2509, has a population of around 6,200 if I'm reading this correctly, and has one natural satellite, Vu, maybe? The one core canon detail we have about Minderia seems to carry over, however, the planet's description mentioning the wool of a native cameloid species being a popular export. Nusaka, basically New Osaka, is another core canon planet with very few details, though its inhabitants are said to have distinct physical features. In the Silver Timeline, the colony was founded in 2447, home to 11 million, and has one moon, Tsukiyomi, I think. Tsukiyomi is one of the names for the moon god of the Japanese Shinto religion. There's an additional note on the screen, though I can't make it out. Persia 9 in the Silver Timeline was founded in the 2400s, maybe 2450, with a former population of 2 million and one moon. The planet was glassed in 2540. Like in core canon, an insurrection was put down there in 2524. Now, before we talk about Mamor, that's plot-critical stuff, let's touch on the colony of Renes. A lot of its lore seems to line up with what we know from core canon. Renes was a mining colony home to about 50,000 workers and only had sparse settlements on its surface. When the planet was hit by the Covenant, their focus on the settlements left the mines largely intact, making the planet ideal for a listening station, at least in core canon. In the Silver Timeline, the colony was founded in 2409, at least I think, and glassed by 2548. Lastly, let's talk about Mamor. In core canon, the planet was a hotbed of insurrectionist activity, with a terrorist bombing on the Haven Arcology in 2511 killing 2 million and leaving several more injured. For Dr. Halsey, these events would cement the need for the Spartan 2 program, and for the UNSC, it meant a crackdown on the planet. The parents of Shyler Silva, a character from Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn, were part of the crackdown and eventually lost their lives against insurrectionists. In 2552, Spartan B312, the future Noble 6, would operate a Saber fighter during anti-insurrectionist action. For the Silver Timeline, the details on the planet are pretty hard to make out, though I could find references to the insurrection. The planet was home to 400 million, and according to John, was where the Spartans lost Nora 098. That's a new Spartan, incidentally. Realizing the empty feelings he had for a fellow Spartan's death, compared to those he feels when he remembers, John decides to cut the pellet out of his back that keeps him balanced. Cortana initially informs Halsey, but the Doctor encourages the AI to help, wanting Cortana to be seen as trustworthy by John. So she does. Unknown to anyone, Kai watches from a distance. Given her anxiety about the Chief's recent actions, it'll be interesting to see how she responds. Will she cut out her pellet too, confront the Chief directly, just watch for a while? We'll have to wait for future episodes. Brief side note, when Cortana reaches out to Halsey, the Doctor is loading something that looks reminiscent of the opening cutscene for the library from Halo CE. It might be nothing, but I wanted to mention it. After removing the pellet, John decides to go out for a bit. Before he leaves, we can spot a can of biofoam in his pod. Biofoam is a medical compound used to seal wounds in the field, as seen in Halo 3 ODST. On his way out, John passes through a literal and metaphorical portal as he's about to take his first steps into a world he's technically never experienced. John then departs from Turl Station, named for the smaller of Reach's moons, Cortana mentioning that the train stops at the Reach Naval Academy, Chakova Park, and Manassas. The academy is pretty straightforward, and Manassas is a major spaceport from the core canon. We even get to see it in the Remember Reach advertisements. Chakova Park is the really interesting mention here, however, seemingly being named after Dima Chakova from Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn, part of the core canon. Cadet Chakova was the daughter of a high-ranking Oni official, and sadly died when Cersinius IV was invaded by the Covenant. I wonder if, in the Silver Timeline, the park was named for her. On the train, John watches human interaction. Here we can find some UNSC recruiting materials. I've also tried to see if the civilian clothing match anything directly from Halo Reach, and while the clothing here fits the aesthetic Bungie established, I wasn't able to find anything specific. Arriving at Chakova Park, John decides to enjoy some music. While he does, a ball lands near him, which he promptly returns to the kid. It's hard to say, but this might be a grav ball, obviously for the sport of grav ball. In core canon, when John was a child, the other children at his school wouldn't let him play grav ball with them, as he always won. The game type Ricochet from Halo 4 and H2A is also a canon variant of grav ball. Returning to White Tower, John attempts to access the artifact again, aided by Cortana when he's seemingly locked out of the room where it's kept. This time we get much clearer images and audio, seeing John's mom and dad, the dad upset about something John is drawing, then forcing the child to bury them. Or at least I hope he's burying the drawings and something else. Can't help but notice a certain canine absent in certain scenes. The drawings come up a lot in these flashbacks, his father seemingly trying to get John to stop for some reason. In these memories, we've seen John and his dog going beyond a wall of some kind, one that reads "Danger beyond this point," which I suspect contains this cave we've seen young John in, and might be where another Forerunner relic is located. During this set of flashbacks, we additionally see 2 clips with John holding a coin, a significant item from the core canon, and even that kind of undersells it. When establishing her Spartan II program, core canon Dr. Halsey was initially funded for 300 candidates, but that was reduced to 150. After she'd identified her candidates, additional funding was dropped, leaving room for only 75 children in the program. To ensure the best, Dr. Halsey and her team scouted the candidates in person. When meeting John, Halsey decided to test him with a coin toss. John would get to keep the coin if he guessed the results correctly. John flips the coin, and John grabs it out of the air, declaring tails and winning the coin. The test represented John's luck, showing that he simply isn't lucky, but he makes his own luck. In the case of the coin, he waited for the optimal outcome and grabbed for it. We'll have to wait to see for sure, but it seems like the coin remains significant even in the silver timeline. After releasing the artifact, John informs Cortana of what he saw and has her cross-reference the new info with the list of planets she'd previously compiled. 3 results come up, one of which is Eridanus II, John's homeworld. Eridanus II in core canon was an outer colony, mostly rural, though it did feature 2 cities and spaceports. It also notably lacked any rings. In the silver timeline, it seems Eridanus II was a site for the UEG's Reach for Life project, which has no core canon parallel, which built self-sustaining ecosystems in the hopes of bringing life to otherwise barren planets. In core canon, terraforming barren worlds wasn't exactly outside the UNSC's ability. They could actually launch meteors at a planet to create a new layer of crust, or comets and ice to give a planet more water. Despite this, the UNSC would still often seek planets that were already somewhat habitable, so as advanced as terraforming might be in core canon, it still has its limits. Interestingly, this image for the project closely resembles Halo's logo. Anyway, when John inquires about the project, the files are said to be lost when the Reach for Life program was shut down, following a plague outbreak on the colony. The planet was then sealed off per Emergency Contact Protocol Upsilon, a protocol in core canon that's specifically for dealing with the Flood. I think it would be a bit of a stretch for the show to be hinting at the Flood being the plague that took out the colony, so I think this is likely just a reference for those in the know. That said though, new timeline, new rules. What's perhaps more interesting though, is when Cortana mentions John being adopted after the outbreak, implying it to be the cover for John's conscription into the Spartan II program. As I've mentioned, in core canon the Spartan II program was covered up by creating clones of the candidates, rapidly growing them to the proper age, then replacing the candidate with the clone. These clones would generally die in the weeks to follow as a result of genetic diseases brought on by the rapid growth. Though some would survive for a few years, they would eventually all pass on. I'm curious now if cloning was ever used in conjunction for the Spartan II program in this timeline. At this point, Halsey decides to stop observing, confronting John though playing ignorant to him removing his pellet. Upon revealing the existence of the other artifact, well, I genuinely love Halsey's look of shock here. Anyway, when John insists on going to the planet directly, Halsey decides to tag along. Departing in the Zhang-He-class vessel, the Endymion II, named after Halsey's homeworld, Chief, Cortana, Halsey, and a complement of scientists depart for Eridanus II. Dr. Saley notes that what they could find could prove ruinous, to which Halsey responds,
That is what Cortana is for.
While I'm skeptical of this direction, I am starting to wonder if the plague on Eridanus II was fake or simply used to cover up John's abduction. We'll see. Back on the rubble, Quan tries to steal a freighter, Soren's favorite we learn, though is unsuccessful. Quan says Soren can't stop her, though Soren retorts, noting,
I could kill you for trying to steal my favorite ship. That would stop you.
I love Soren's twisted humor. Quan is ultimately able to get Soren to escort her to Madrigal, promising her family has money from the deuterium they'd been selling for years. At Command on Reach, Maki's transmission, though scrambled, is detected and Miranda Keyes is assigned to analyze it. We also learned that her system suffered a major crash, heavily implied to be Halsey's doing. With her now off planet, Captain Keyes recommends his daughter use every moment she has and properly protect her work. And that is going to do it for this episode breakdown. This was a massive episode in terms of lore references, and like the second episode, is more dedicated to world building and laying groundwork for future events. This was also the first episode where I found myself a little dissatisfied with the story. Oban particularly felt off-kilter to me. I like the idea of giving Maki a reason to dislike humanity from the get-go, but I feel like Oban's state could have been tied more directly to the Covenant War. Additionally, as noted, it feels like the show is setting up the Master Chief as a sort of chosen one. While certain details from the games have given people that impression in core canon, I personally never felt that to be an accurate description. As I said earlier, John wasn't the best, he was just the one who survived and happened to do what he did. With the show, I've been getting a much more he's been chosen by fate sort of vibe. Still, it's only episode 3, so we're missing a lot of information and context. Though, I have to say, seeing my roommate, normally just tolerant of me talking about Halo, show genuine interest in the show after episode 1 was rather exciting. If the show clicks for general audiences, that's probably going to be a win in my book. But these are just my thoughts and observations. Let me know yours in the comments below, or over on the Halo Canon Discord. Thank you for watching as always, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. Thank you once again for watching Canonites. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, maybe even share it around, both of which help the channel. And if you aren't subscribed already, consider becoming a fellow Canonite and hitting that notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. Halo Canon now has a Discord server, which you can find linked in the description box below. If you like discussing any aspect of Halo's lore, well, that's what we specialize in. Thank you all once more, and keep on being awesome.